All right, awesome. So we have a couple of joinees already, and I guess we can start the webinar. So, all right, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. As you know, the topic is transforming HR with AI. And first of all, thank you so much, Stephen and Walter, for being here and co-hosting this webinar with us. All right, so for a quick description of what we're going to cover today is that, we have planned a detailed, like a discussion session. We have multiple questions that are frequently asked, and especially managing this particular transition that's going to happen. We would go as in description essentially of what kind of changes are expected, what kind of tools and what kind of upcoming trends you guys can tackle in order to stay ahead of this curve. So let me just quickly give you a quick snapshot of who we are and what we do, like a 40,000 foot perspective. vTech Solution Inc. here representing is a chemistry certified manager-owned company, and we are headquartered at Winnipeg. What we do is like we provide managed staffing and IT consulting, IT solution services. We are working with a lot of government and commercial clients throughout Canada. And if you have any kind of hiring requirements, talent needs, which are specifically related to, admin, clerical, IT, non-IT positions, we can definitely, assist you guys with that. Joining us today on this webinar is Stephen. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us. So for those who don't know much about Stephen, let me give you a quick snapshot. Stephen is the CVO and founder of College Recruiter. And this is a fantastic, he's going to tell you more about the brand and what services they provide directly from the, the mouth of the horse. We're gonna tackle it from that front. But let me tell you one interesting thing about Stephen, that he has more than 17,000 followers on LinkedIn, and he is also named as one of the top 100 influencers in talent acquisition industry by TA Tech. So glad to have you on the call, Stephen. Please do illuminate our audience about College Recruiter and what do you do and what your role is.
Yeah, no sweat. So College Recruiter is a job search site. We believe that that every student and recent graduate deserves a great career. Until a little over a year ago, our two different customer groups, the candidates who use our site, they don't pay anything, and the employers that advertise their jobs with us, that virtually all of those were in the US. A little over a year ago, we went international, and now already about a third of our business is what we call global. There are a few countries that we aren't in that I don't think we'll ever go into, North Korea, for example. But otherwise, we basically have followed where our customers are. Customers are increasingly centralizing their recruitment advertising, and that has led to them desiring to use fewer vendors worldwide. So we've gone in that path. I grew up in Winnipeg, moved here to Minneapolis when I was 22 for grad school. And I think that my favorite joke is that I'm probably the only person in the history of Minnesota to have ever moved here for the weather.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Stephen, for that. We also have with us Walter. So glad to have you here, Walter, with us. He has like 25 years experience of creating and managing multiple tech companies, with his last position being with SteamML as the founder and CEO. So great to have you here, Walter. And for those who don't know, Walter is also a certified ski instructor. So a man with many talents. Thank you so much for joining us, Walter, today. Please do describe about yourself to our target audience.
Well, thank you, Simrat. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's great to meet you and meet Steve and have this excellent chat. Yeah, it's been a fun ride thus far. Spending a lot of time in the tech sector across multiple disciplines, whether it's software development or more recently blockchain, AI areas, and when I started in the tech, really, I started in 1998, where I started was selling website development services, and it was raw. We were still using 14.4, 1.8K, modems and dial-up modems and so on. We still called it the information superhighway back then. And it was a lot of learning, and it's been a lot of learning over the last couple of decades. And so today, I do a lot of consulting, advising, and mentoring, and public speaking, and I spend a lot of time doing that. I live in beautiful British Columbia in the Okanagan, and as Simrat mentioned, in part-time, I'm fortunate enough to be a ski instructor at the Silver Star Mountain Resort, and so if that's just 30 minutes up the mountain in Vernon, BC. And if you haven't been there, if you do ski or board, although we're trying to reduce the amount of snowboarders on the hill. I mean, they've been a hazard since the 80s. So we reluctantly allow them on the hill, but it's really beautiful, and I'm really just fortunate to be able to stay involved in the sport that I've been involved in for over 30 years. So it's exciting, and learned a lot, actually. I learned a lot about not only myself and my physical capabilities, but teaching and working with people and the psychology behind it. And there's a lot of training involved, in fact, actually. So, being a professional ski instructor, it's been a fascinating ride. And it's wonderful because it gets me outside of my tech and business head, right? Because you're not thinking about the bottom line and your P&L. You're thinking about, man, can I bend that ski? So it's a fascinating venture into another world, if you will.
Awesome, that's awesome. For a fact that I'm coming, so awesome. All right, so a quick introduction about me. So I'm Simrat Singh. I'm the Senior Director here at vTech. I'm also a strategic consultant for talent acquisition. So anyone that has, I would put definitely my email and everything is available on my LinkedIn profile. Do check that out and give me a, text if you just want to connect. All right, thank you guys. All right, so the very first question that we have is a common round question. It is, in what ways has AI-driven automation transformed various industries, and how has it influenced workforce dynamics, including job roles and skill requirements? What are your thoughts, guys? Steven?
Shall I go first, Walter?
Sure, yeah.
Or do you want to go first?
Yeah.
Sure. I would say that we're at the very, very early stages. So I don't think that there has been nearly as much transformation up until now as I think what we're going to see over the next year, 2 years, 3 years. That I think that one of the things that we're all discovering, realizing, really internalizing is that we've actually been using AI for years. We didn't know it, or we didn't really care about it because it didn't directly impact us. It sort of impacted the tools we were using behind the scenes, but it wasn't really changing our lives in a real blatant, overt way. So for example, some of the leading video games from the 90s actually used AI. The sim games, the theme park game used an early version of AI. Well, my kids played those games. We didn't know that that was AI. And much more recently, Google has been using AI in its search results for years, but didn't really talk about it. College Recruiter licenses some technology from Google for our search and some other stuff that we do. And we knew that that was AI powered, but it was kind of like, so what? At the end of the day, it's not about, to me, whether it's blockchain or Web3 or AI. I think when customers start to say, I'm looking for an AI solution, I think that the premise is wrong. They should be focused on the outcomes. What does it do for me? And they should be looking to vTech and other organizations to help them achieve those outcomes. So I'm not one to get all hung up on does it include AI? Does it not include AI? It can include AI and be horrible. It cannot include AI and be fantastic. So, man, if your leader is coming to you and says, we need an AI solution to do blank, to me, that's a leader who's getting too caught up in the shiny new thing. Now, that said, I think we're going to see a massive transformation in virtually every job category, in virtually every industry, especially here in North America and Western Europe, and then a little bit slower in the rest of the world. I struggle to think of any job, any occupation, any organization that's not going to be significantly impacted by AI within the next couple of years.
That's true.
Likely with the exception of ski instructing. You have to actually be on your skis, and that being said, though, that's not to say that algorithms can't help us understand and learn pressure within the boot and when to apply it and so on. So algorithms can certainly play a role, but unless you turn yourself into a robot, you're going to still have to do it actually physically. So but no, I think, Steve, I think you're right. AI, in terms of, like, we should remember that it's an all-encompassing term, right? That there are, when you break it down, there are a multitude of facets to this, machine learning, visual machine learning. I think that you're right in the sense that the world, if you want to just say, just about everybody in terms of business, is a little bit shell-shocked right now, because when November of last year, when OpenAI released their large language model, ChatGPT, which is becoming a pretty well-known platform now, obviously, it kind of opened up the door to the capabilities to the average individual, right? With the exception of, say, software developers and programmers and engineers who might have been using very specific algorithms to achieve outcomes within the code they were writing and the solutions they were building. But now, somebody can actually, call it up and start developing, some automation within their work processes. So that is what's really, I think, changed. And I think focusing on the desired outcomes, focusing on where we want to go, what we want to achieve, I think is a great place to start, Steve. I think that's absolutely correct. And AI, just like blockchain, isn't a silver bullet. Having said that, it is permeating through the entire enterprise on a multitude of levels as we speak. Someone probably just launched a new tool, right? And through being in the tech sector for over 20 plus years, I've never seen the pace at which innovation is happening as we are seeing right now. And so it's exciting, but it's also something that we should really delve into and understand before we start just rapidly, deploying it without any understanding of the impacts on the enterprise, right down to the job, description and the job performance. So there isn't an area, as you say, that isn't being touched by it on some level. But what we're really talking about is algorithms working behind the scenes, achieving certain results in an automation basis that would have taken you and I or individuals to do a lot of steps.
Yes.
I mean, I remember when we started with my agency back in 2008 and 9, we started looking at social and web analytics, and we were looking at and deploying brand monitoring software at the time, which was working to develop algorithms that could accurately interpret language and conversations. And it was still very, very clunky, right? You might search for something that somebody said, I'm going to the Big Apple, and the algorithm was having a difficult time distinguishing between the fruit and the city, right? And so, it was clunky. So we helped these platforms develop and refine the algorithms so that it could get more accurate in developing, sentiment analysis. So it has been around for a while. It just hasn't been in the hands of everybody so wide open and with large language models. So it's a fascinating evolution we're living in, frankly.
Yeah, if I may just build very briefly on something that Walter said, because one of the phrases he used was behind the scenes. And I think that's something that's important for us to keep in mind, because I'm still hearing from some people that my organization does not use AI. And right.
Is that a good thing?
Well, No, probably, but the reality is there are no organizations. Well, rather than giving you a double negative, every organization's using AI.
Exactly.
Even if you have not purchased an AI product, I guarantee you some of your vendors are, some of your customers are, some of your partners are. And so for organizations to sort of say, we're not doing this, it's like saying we're not breathing air. We all are, all of the time. Sometimes it's more obvious than other times.
Exactly. So there is definitely AI running in background. Like you use Microsoft Office 365. Well, you have AI,
Yep.
right? You're already using it. Google Drive,
Yep.
same thing. Right?
You use a search engine, you're using it. Yep, absolutely.
So what Walter, interesting thing that what he said was that the pace at which the AI tools are coming up, right? It is quite overwhelming, and we are on a point of achieving singularity, right? Where technology creates technology, right? And it is bound to happen. It was supposed to happen. That's how we unlock the next civilizational, achievement, that we have achieved singularity. Now we don't need to, invest time into building technologies, because technology is continuing, its own existence. So that's an amazing point. Like my entire goal right now with AI is to just make my computer like proud of me, right? We have reached that point. I just want my computer to feel proud. Right? My human is good. Right? So that's one thing. Stephen, you did mention during your, when you were giving your answer, you mentioned about the tools that are coming up, right, to make it more beneficial for the team. And you said specifically that we have been these tools, AI tools, we are hearing it a lot because AGI is the new, it's a revolution, right? So we are hearing it, but it has been in play for a very long time. And you are spot on that. I have some data here. So there is an article already on the website, on vTech Solution website. You can read that. So EY, Ernst & Young, back in 2017, introduced a chatbot called Goldie, right? And what it does is basically, essentially, is that any kind of employee question that we have, right? So if he wants to know about the maternity leave policy, they want to know about what kind of other policies are there. You don't need to go contact an HR guy. You don't need to go and, find through employee handbooks and documentation. You can just ask this chatbot because it is pre-fed on almost every kind of information, employee information and company policies and procedures. Right? Even if you have questions like, hey, if I take this much leave off, how many leave would have been remaining in my place? These kind of questions can also be, these bots can answer. And they did it in 2017. Right.
Yeah.
In 2017, Citizen Bank also introduced Mica, which was for their customer, support for part and all those. So we have been using it for a while now, but with the current, GPT transformation, everything has, kind of adapted and it has become too fast paced. But that's where the companies need to evolve. So next question we have for Walter. With AI being a transformative force, how can organizations foster a culture of continuous learning and innovation to stay ahead in this fast changing landscape?
Well, this is a question that's not unique to AI. It's a question about leadership and an outlook on how you approach business in general, right? And how you adopt technologies, how you integrate those technologies, how you train your staff to work with those technologies. So it really starts with leadership, to be frank. And so if leadership isn't willing to adopt, in this case, some sort of AI solution and says, oh, we're not using AI at all, we're not interested in that. I mean, I would like to know the type of business that maybe it is. Maybe it's it's a service-based business, a retail-based business, but there's still areas of opportunity to leverage, the technology, even in those cases, of course. So, but I think it really starts with the psychology of wanting to be more innovative and continually learning. So I would start there with the executive level of making a decision to make it a priority. And so once they do that, then they can look at, well, what ways can we do that and implement that sort of new outlook? You may be aware that Google back in the day, and they may still do this, but they allowed their employees to assign 20% of their time working on their own ideas away from their normal tasks. And so the reason for that is just to allow them to play and come up with fresh things and fresh solutions outside of the normal process of their workflow. So I think that it's interesting that the leaders need to think about designing a vision around innovation and a culture that embraces new ideas as opposed to shuns them and says, hey, this is the way we've always done it, right? I think that's frankly, that is, and it has been for a long time, that's a recipe for failure, long term, right? Long term. You may have something that you're dialed in right now, it's working, you're profitable, and you're okay today. But I can tell you, it's just like Steve mentioned, there are many of your competitors and organizations that are figuring out ways to do it better, faster, bigger, whatever. And so one of the ideas that I've deployed with clients is the developing a skunkworks, an internal skunkworks. So you take an organization that doesn't have this sort of innovative flavor to what they do every day, and you say, look, let's build this area of new ideas. Let's put a multidiscipline team together. Let's bring it from across the organization. Let's put them together. Let's pay for it, obviously, but let's let the ideas flow. And solving big problems within our organization, right? So what are the biggest things that we need to solve? Now let's come up with really innovative ways. No idea is a bad idea. Let's throw it up on the wall and have a look at it, and then evolve. So start from that problem that we want to solve and work backwards. But I think that, it really has, it becomes really fun. It becomes, something that people really embrace because they're allowed to be creative now and express opinions and communicate and listen. So I think that would be a place that I would start, just to have some, even if it's for a temporary amount of time, 90 days or something. But that's how Lockheed Skunk Works started. That's how a number of really interesting and innovative solutions were developed, was just unleashing the ideas. So that's where I would say that it needs to start with leadership.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Walter, on that one. Stephen, so the next question is for you. All right. For Canadian organizations, how can they effectively utilize AI to enhance their HR processes without significant resource constraint? Because that is one of the top concern that usually, leaders in HR are facing, is that like resource constraints, because budget is always a key essential. So what?
Yeah, there are a load of applications and options out there that cost very little money. So, for example, ChatGPT, the basic version is free to everybody. Get an account, you're somewhat limited in how many queries you can have a day, but most people aren't going to come close to the number of queries once they get past the wow factor, and then they sort of settle in, and then it becomes like going to Google, and you might do that a few times a day. So you've got plenty. I pay for the $20. I don't know what it costs in Canada, but it's $20 in the US. If it's also $20 in Canada, I should get a Canadian account, because then it's more like $15, but whatever. It's basically the same service. It's a little bit faster. For $20 a month, you have instant access to information that's consolidated in a very user-friendly, readable manner. People talk about the hallucinations, the made-up facts. You actually have to try pretty hard to find those. So people who aren't using ChatGPT are scared off by that narrative. But the reality is the vast majority of what any of us look up online is pretty routine. 30 years ago, you would have gone to a library, you would have opened a book, maybe an encyclopedia, you would have gone to that page, and you would have seen a summary of the information. And maybe it was right, and maybe it wasn't. We have this perception that ChatGPT is biased, or that Wikipedia is biased, and that somehow didn't exist before those products or those offerings. And that's just simply not true. If anything, there was more biased when you had one person or a small group of people putting together a book and them saying, these are the facts. Now these tools are taking advantage of the community. So things like that. One of the things that we've done, and College Recruiter is a fairly small organization. So when you talk about resources, we're going to have a lot less than an employer with 1,000 employees or 5,000 or 10,000, but we have 20 and also some contractors. We signed up for that ChatGPT. I'm using it, piloting it. That's going to roll out to more people in the organization. It's kind of proof of concept. It's part of my role is to play with this to see if there's a business case to it. Probably for every 5 tools, I find one that's actually going to be helpful, and then that rolls out. So like Walter was talking before about like a skunkworks, that's kind of that same idea. I have long dreamed of being able to have College Recruiter create content, job search articles, hiring, talent acquisition articles, etc., at scale. And also to have video content created at scale that we can share videos to YouTube, TikTok, Facebook. It wasn't economically feasible for us to do that until this year.
Absolutely, that's true.
So what would have taken about 2 or 3 days of staff time to do now takes me as a non-techie about 40 minutes. And so we can now create highly customized content. We're not just like doing a ChatGPT article, copying and pasting it. We use that as a first draft and then edit the hell out of it and then use that as the basis for videos. And so there are example after example. So there was an article published the other day by Nielsen Norman Group, and they highlighted 3 different areas of where AI is having a really beneficial impact. And the biggest one was on software developers. So it's an incredible tool to help you write code. Our developers are also using it for quality assurance. Here's the code I've written, and I'm not a developer, but you see any problems with it? And they're finding problems that otherwise they wouldn't have found till later in the process, and that would have been more expensive. So they're able to do more QA on their own of their own work in real time. And what they're saying is that they're not going down into these rabbit holes and then finding out that they made a mistake 3 days before that's really messed them up. So this study said that that programmers are able to deliver 126% more code in a week using generative AI than without. Same programmer, same skills, other than the generative AI piece. I also see a lot being done and I think that Canada has more than its share of call centers. There's a lot done there also, that call center employees with access to this, where the content is their user manuals, their procedures, debugging, whatever that call center is dealing with, that's what the AI is trained on. So when somebody calls in, that first level of support is able to get to the correct answer a lot faster, rather than having to flip through papers or do a bunch of searching in documents or putting the caller on hold and going and getting somebody who has more experience. It's more at their fingertips. It's like an internal chat bot.
Awesome. Awesome. So yeah, it's like it's fascinating, right? The way things are like kind of falling into place, like everything has something, created something in its wake. And it's like, the entire system is kind of streamlining for benefit for like everybody. Especially if I talk about HR part, you said about using GPT for, writing content, right? It can do a lot more, like even for like organizational policies, employee handbooks, you name it, it is able to do it, right? You want to frame a specific policy, or if there is a violation to a specific policy, maybe you want to write down a detailed email of how that policy correlates. Like it is your playground, right? Actually,
Yeah.
it is playground.
The word of caution, though, is do not outsource your work to ChatGPT or any other generative AI.
We will come to that.
It's an assistant.
Yes.
It's your co-pilot. It's your buddy.
Absolutely.
It doesn't allow you to just stay at home and in bed all day. As appealing as that would be some days, you have to still be in charge.
We
Well,
do
that kind of goes directly to, in terms of performance and talent management in a way. When you think about coders producing 126% more code in the same amount of time, for example, it's interesting because there could be a tendency where you produce that amount of code, but because you've got some free time, you could be laying down and chilling out because you've achieved those outcomes in a much quicker time frame. And so in some situations, that's just fine. Relax, let your brain decompress. I think the important point to remember here, for those folks who really haven't immersed themselves in this space and adopted, even ChatGPT as a 3.5 or the lowest level, don't buy too much into the fear of missing out, right? The FOMO element to this. Take a look at, the fact that on a basic level, there's always going to be the human plus, it should be human plus AI as opposed to just human, right? Or just AI, as Steve was pointing out there. So I think about there, the benefits are increased automation, increased accuracy, increased access to data analysis in a much shorter period of time, quality assurance. These are all interesting things that we can benefit from. You want to watch for errors and biases as has been mentioned, and I think that they are real. It does still happen, and it's going to continue to happen because it's learning. These large language models are learning from the people creating the data in the first place, and that's everybody sitting on this call. So as we make mistakes, it's going to have to interpret and learn about those, and so remembering that it doesn't actually think, right? Generative AI is not actually thinking. What it's doing is a statistical analysis of the most likely correct answer to the question, and based on massive amounts of metadata that it consumes.
Isn't that what we are doing as well as human beings when we
Yeah,
are?
that's right. Yeah, exactly. We make those decisions. But here's the interesting thing, though, about the differences is that we apply a consciousness to our thinking. We apply things like empathy. We apply things that are important. They're subtle, but they're important, and it's the things that the models do not do. So what's interesting, though, that we're on a Web 3.0 discussion, and so wait until we get to Web 4, Web 5, where intelligent smart agents have actually replaced entirely the call center environment in a lot of ways, because they have become so adept at answering every single question that might come up with respect to your cell phone or your internet connectivity. I mean, now you might spend a couple of hours on the phone with a tech that's going through all of these standard problems that you may have with connectivity, where a smart agent will actually work through all of those things and solve the problem behind the scenes. You don't even have to get on a call. So
they won't start off by telling me to reformat my hard drive?
No, because the agent will actually, the agent, if you give it access, could do that for you, right? That's where we're headed. But what's interesting is that the improving it was, we think about the HR process and the benefits there and so on. I think it's a really exciting time for HR professionals in a lot of ways, because they can automate a lot of tasks that were low value tasks, repetitive tasks, administrative things that can be automated and put into a process that is taking, giving you time back, that you can then focus on the high performance type of tasks that are still there to do and important. And I think about, when it comes to the automation of, let's say, going through thousands of resumes for a particular job description, one of the things that I think is interesting is that it can eliminate some biases that might be, present from the HR professional side. You're looking for this kind of individual or that not. But what I think should also be, considered is the fact that intuition, right? That empathy, intuition is also removed in terms of, well, the resume doesn't tell the whole story. We all know this. And so, can the algorithm look through that and understand maybe some critical skills that this individual has that maybe don't show up on the documents side? And so, at this moment, that's a no. And so, HR professionals need to retain that element of oversight and understand that they need to remain in the loop and still guide that process so that those things aren't missed. I don't know if anybody on this call knows this, but radiologists, there's a study, and this is based on some previous work of mine, but radiologists actually make, an inaccurate call 23% of the time. So when you go to get an X-ray, an MRI, a CAT scan, 23% of the time that diagnosis is inaccurate. Either you have a tumor and they say you don't, or you don't have a tumor and they say you do. And so 23% of the time is a massive, massive margin of error. And so AI, it can help in these kinds of scenarios where it can improve that accuracy right up to 100% once it's been trained with the correct amount of data. And what's interesting is that sort of ability can be transformed and implemented, and it is being implemented in the HR industry in a multitude of ways. So it's an exciting time, to be a part of that industry. I think privacy concerns are also something that people should be considering because of the large amount of analysis that can take place and the amount of data that can be crunched. There's a risk of privacy, my private data coming into that assessment of whether I'm the right candidate for the job, right? So what I find fascinating is the discussion about, we as individuals and whether we own our own identity, right? Our own data, and whether we then give it permission to use it, and at what point do they end having permission. And I think that's, where things like blockchain can play a role and will play a role on the privacy side. But I think that HR should be considering privacy concerns as they deploy and ownership of data, right? As they deploy other platforms within their enterprise and inside the firewall. Well, who owns the data that's being generated and shared back and forth? So these are questions that need to be asked and explored as they develop their roadmap.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Walter. I guess this was the question, exactly what you described. What are the potential benefits and risks? So we have kind of covered that one as well. I guess next question is for Stephen. From your perspective, what are the most promising AI applications for HR beyond recruitment and talent management? And how can organization explore these opportunities? Before we get into that question, I would also like to tell all the attendees that we do have a tool stack that you guys can screenshot at the end of this presentation. We would be going into that details, but as of now, Stephen, please go ahead.
Yeah, the space that we play in, that College Recruiter plays in, the job search space, is in that recruitment space, which is a subset of talent management. So as I was thinking about this, one of the areas that I think that AI has tremendous promise for when it comes to HR is the learning and development training, if you will. It's very, very costly to pull a team out and send them for training, go to a conference to upskill them, however that works in your organization for a particular need. But AI has the ability to deliver highly customized training at the pace that the employee needs it, the way the employee needs it, incredibly cheaply, on demand. So I think that the days of the corporate offsite so that your sales team can learn over the course of 3 days this new software tool that you're bringing in, I think those days are rapidly coming to an end. And good, because it was an incredibly inefficient process. If you had 20 people going to that offsite, 3 of them might have benefited really a lot. And maybe another few would be kind of like, okay, pretty good. And the other dozen were probably drunk most of the time at the hotel bar. And another area that I see HR really benefiting from, and this certainly goes into the recruitment and talent management space, but not at all, is and I think, Walter, you were talking about this earlier, is a lot of sort of the low value grunt work that we all do. And I think some of that is going to be necessary, but think of the trying to schedule a meeting for 6 people scenario and how many times you have to go back and forth. I'm pretty good and efficient at that, but when you're trying to line up calendars with half a dozen people, maybe on different continents, different offices, different work hours, it can be a nightmare. There are calendaring tools out there now powered by AI where, you know, Sonia or whatever the AI assistant basically goes and says, are you available at these times? They can check your calendar. And in milliseconds, they can identify that half-hour slot next Wednesday at 2:30 that works for everybody. You know, when we ask questions about when are you available for a phone call, Simrat, right? And I might say, tell me when you're not. That I can ask it that way. That doesn't mean you're going to answer it that way. You may reply back, Thursday would be best for me. Well, that's not what I asked. And the reason I don't really care that Thursday is good for you is because Thursday may be bad for Walter. So I'm trying to, like, the more people, the more difficult it becomes exponentially. I'm starting to see some of our customers, our employer customers, and we don't play in this space at all, but payroll and benefits. The questions, and I think Walter alluded to this earlier, the questions that all of us have about our benefits, what's in the employee handbook. Hey, I just got a summons for jury duty. And what's the policy? Am I going to get paid? Am I not going to get paid? Do I get time off? Do I not? All of that stuff can be handled internally, and you don't then have to have an HR assistant on the other end, essentially functioning as an in-house call center, fielding and answering those questions. The beauty of the chatbots, for example, as one form of the AI tech is that people prefer to work with people, to interact with people. But what the studies show is that if they have to wait to interact with a person, or if they can interact with a person right away, but know that there's a good likelihood that they're going to get bad information, people would actually prefer to interact right away with a chatbot and knowing that they're going to get correct information. So it's like they prefer chatbots to people because it's immediate and it's accurate. If they could get immediate and accurate support from people, they would prefer to work with people. And you know what, if I was 7'4" and can dunk a basketball, I would prefer that too. And that's not going to happen either.
Yeah, I think you make a great point, Steve. I think that the immediacy to the answers, I think all those things that you just mentioned, in fact, within large or medium-sized organizations can be a real drain on time and resources, and they're repetitive, right? So today's chatbots can easily handle those, that I would say 90% of those inquiries very quickly and very easily. Like, for example, I don't know if you've played with Perplexity, but Perplexity is an interesting chatbot that you can play with. And it would be fascinating or phenomenal in this kind of scenario where you would ask those kinds of questions and it can provide that kind of conversational response. And there's a lot of conversational chatbots that are improving in terms of their capabilities and can be designed and directed towards a specific silo, in this case payroll and things of pension related and so on. So and not just that, I mean, but HR and policies and health and safety, the whole gambit. So it's exciting because I have to imagine that being on the other side of that call on a day-to-day basis could be much like the systems administrator getting that email or call that their email isn't working at this person on the 4th floor, and can you come help me set up my email? That sort of routine administrative stuff that can be frustrating. So the technology can take on those kinds of things and allow the HR professionals in this case to then focus on things that where they still very much should play a role. For example, in performance management and reviews. Performance reviews, I think, are a key area that HR needs to remain in that process and not outsource it to AI, because they just won't have that same intuition as to how that individual is performing or potentially performing from that 360-degree view of their actions, right? So I think that's critical, and so where the tools fit within the organization, and what part of that process is a critical discussion at the start that you have to have at the outset, right? In terms of developing your roadmap.
Talking on the similar terms, Walter, the next question is very much in line with what you are saying. With AI-driven automation impacting job roles and skill requirements, how can business proactively reskill and upskill their workforce to adapt to these changes?
Yeah, well, exactly. So I think upskilling and reskilling really, I think the biggest advantage is how you onboard new employees, right? There's all these front end questions and things that, it's a new environment. I don't know where to start. I just got hired today. Yay, I'm excited. But now there's this onboarding process, not only filling out documentation, but then understanding and reading. And so I think micro learning becomes a really important element here, where you can use things like Perplexity and other chatbots, but other learning management systems that are AI driven, where you can onboard new employees so much more effectively and quickly, and they can learn and get up to speed just that much faster than if they were having to go and do that, training classroom environment. They can learn at their own pace individually, which is great. Then the other thing is, of course, is from a performance management and accountability factor, then the HR or the supervisor can tell that this new employee has filled out all of these things and has learned these things and is now certified or whatever. It's an important layer of accountability that can happen very easily. And so the micro learning elements, I think, is something that all organizations should really start to adopt and think about. But it's that, what's also really kind of critical for organizations is when employees go through the organization and let's say they're more mature and they've been with the company for a longer period of time, they may not be upskilling in the same way. And so because they've got that experience, that knowledge capital already, how do we take those sort of mid-level to upper performing employees and get them to even improve and adopt these new ways of learning? And so these are questions that you have to take a look at from an enterprise-wide perspective. But
at a leadership level, essentially. Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right.
Next question
set that out.
Is exactly for Stephen, which almost is within this line, that how do you see AI technologies shaping the future of leadership and management practices in organization? And what skills do leaders need to develop to effectively harness AI's potential?
I was just going to say, before we jump into that, if you don't mind, I was just going to say that when it comes back to just a final comment on the upskilling side, there was a study by McKinsey that said that approximately by 2026, I think they said, 25% of all people will be spending at least an hour in virtual reality. And so we talked about VR earlier, but VR is going to become a really interesting space from a training perspective and from an upskilling perspective. Steve mentioned it earlier. It's a much safer environment to work in and train in. It's certainly more cost effective in a lot of ways once it's set up. And so I think that VR is going to play a really integral role in upskilling going forward. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that.
That's true. Awesome.
Yeah. When I look at this question about the future of leadership, it causes me to think back 70 years, and I'm not 70. Sometimes I feel like it, but I'm not. But in the 1950s and 1960s is when offices started to see widespread adoption of calculators. And until that time, employees were using slide rules, paper and pen. My dad used an abacus. He was an accountant. And there was nothing wrong with those tools at the time. That was the most advanced technology. But one of the things that happened, I remember him telling me this over and over again when I was fairly young, was that there was tremendous resistance by leaders in accounting firms, accounting departments, et cetera, to accountants using calculators. And the idea being, well, two things. One was, I didn't use it when I was at your point in my career, and so neither should you. To me, that's kind of the same argument for hazing. It's not a very good argument. Just because I suffered, it should give me more reason to help ensure that you don't have to suffer as well, not to inflict the same harm on you. The other thing is that they felt like if our employees become too reliant on calculators, they won't be able to do this basic math anymore. To which my answer is good. Why would they need to? If you can do it faster and more accurately, why would you want to turn back? It's not like somebody's going to come in and outlaw calculators. And if your batteries...
Well, Steve, when was the last time anyone on this call wrote a handwritten letter, right, for business purposes and mailed it out, right? And, you know, like, thank you very much for whatever. I mean, if you went out of your way to write a handwritten note to somebody as a pleasant thing to do still, which would be really interesting from a marketing perspective in some cases, but quite honestly, we don't do that, you know, anymore. And
I think
time marches on.
I physically can't.
And the second part of the question, Simrat, is sort of like, what do leaders need to develop? And I think leaders need to embrace change.
That's so.
And there are certain industries, I'm kind of glad that they do not embrace a lot of change. Banking, insurance. Like, you wouldn't want to walk into your bank tomorrow and find out that they've completely changed the way that they're doing business and what their products are like. You want stability, you want conservatism, not in a political sense, but in an operational sense. But other industries, those of us who are more technology industries, there's value in leaders embracing change. And part of that is you need to be prepared for your employees to make mistakes. And you need to be okay with that. In fact, you need to set up a system to reward that. Employees should be able to make mistakes where the risks are low and the upside is high. And that is a piece that I think a lot of leaders struggle with. They think that a mistake is a mistake is a mistake. Well, if this person makes a mistake, that's going to cost me $1 million. Well, if so, fair enough. That is a mistake you want to avoid. But if they may make a mistake and they waste an hour, but that gets them closer to an answer so that in the next hour, they accomplish a day's worth of work, what's wrong with them spending a couple of hours making a mistake and then finding the correct way? I see AI the same way. I see fear of the unknown and a reluctance to try it. So when I'm talking with HR leaders, I say, look for opportunities where the risk is low and the upside is high. Start there. This is not something that you have to completely revolutionize the way you're doing business. You should not completely revolutionize the way you're doing business. Start with that low-hanging fruit to the guy who lives near cherry trees. That was a reference to where Walter lives.
Yeah, Steve threw that over to me. You know, where I live, I am surrounded by cherry trees, actually. You know, it's an interesting point in terms of resistance to change, right? Going back to the psychology of leadership and sort of what's important. I mean, I think some of the biggest wins in an organization come out of failure, right? They don't come out of doing the same thing all the time. The real big discoveries come from learning from failure. And I think that organizations that embrace that and understand it and don't lose their minds completely over it, even, you know, but if the mistake is preventable from the perspective of foreseeable, you can see that it could happen, like slips, trips, and falls. I mean, I think that that's important, right? To try to avoid those mistakes. But quite often, in terms of business process and evolving and innovation, you know, really interesting things can be learned from it. Some of my biggest wins in business in general have come from right after a failure, and whether that was a catastrophic failure or a little failure, we learned and we analyzed it. I mean, like post-it notes, right? Post-it notes. This is an example of learning from a
Right.
failure, right?
Right.
The
Good
glue didn't
Minnesota
work.
product.
The
Good
glue didn't
Minnesota
work,
product.
and
It's yeah.
yeah. And if you weren't open to that, if you were just saying, hey, it's a failure, that sucks, and let's move on, we wouldn't all have these little post-it notes hanging around on our desk. So I think you need to embrace it and not be so resistant to change. I think, the low-hanging fruit is a great point. And I think that you find, again, that let's do a SWOT analysis and take a look at, well, what part of our process do we need to improve the most? But what's the sort of simplest way to get involved in that and solve that? Maybe it's a chat bot, maybe it's not, maybe it's a learning management system you're already using, but then, you up scale it to a better functioning version or something like that. But I really
What does
think
the
you need to
future
be
of
open
work
to it.
looks like, Walter, as per you? Like, what is the future of work, especially related to workforce dynamics and HR practices? How does
Well,
the
I alluded to it earlier, right? So I think that there's going to come a time when smart agents are literally going to do the role of talent acquisition and recruitment in terms of identifying the right candidate. And I'll be working along, and then I'll get a notification that there's an opportunity that's perfectly suited for me. Now, you might get automated emails like this that are enticing you from platforms like Indeed or Monster Jobs or whatever, that are saying, hey, there's you're searching for truck driving jobs, and so hey, Lafarge is hiring, and I've just pulled those names out of the air, but so you should apply. Well, that AI is really good at tagging, so you can say, well, okay, truck driving in the resume fits with truck driving in the job description, and that's about as sophisticated as it gets. However, the intelligent smart agents that are coming are going to be able to get much more in-depth analysis done and a much better fit. And so that I think is how one of the ways that it's going to transform the HR professional's job in terms of talent acquisition. And I think we're very close to that, now, but we're getting there for sure. So that's one of the critical areas. And then in terms of upskilling, we talked about it in terms of developing new skills and retaining those employees, right? Being, for example, there's a lot of stress in work, right? There's a lot of stress in being a business owner. There's a lot of stress in being an employee. And so how does AI play a role in employee retention and employee satisfaction? Because we all know that it's much more expensive to go out, try and find a new employee, hire them, train them, put them in place for a job description, as opposed to retaining an employee that already understands 80% of the job and get them that last 20% of the way to make them fit that new role. So I think that that's going to be a really critical part in terms of going forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Walter. Before we can continue like 5-10 minutes, we have already reached the 3:01 time frame. So we have already crossed 1 minute. But everyone there who has joined, this is an HR Leader AI tool stack, which are just curated couple of tool stacks, which are AI involved. Intello, I guess we already talked about biometrics earlier in the conversation. Higher View, which is like, it can do a lot of video interviews and everything. It can even assess different candidates by doing the first level interview for you. So a lot many good things with that. Eurobit, which is again a custom chatbot service. Like they can build like the Goldie we talked about for Ernst & Young. They can build custom chatbots which are trained on your data set, and it can be deployed within your organization, on your website, or on your intranet for the employees to access. So they do a lot of AI custom chatbot preparation. We also have Operize, which is like a human cloud platform. So these are the tool stacks that you guys can copy. We would also be releasing a white paper with detailed information. So anyone that wants that information can go ahead and collect that. Watch out for that space. We'll definitely send a link to everyone that has joined this webinar. But before we end, we can again go back. Yeah, we can keep on discussing what the future of work looks like. And this is just, for those who have time, who can attend 5-15 minutes more, they can spend on, understanding more basics of what's happening in the world of HR. They can definitely stick around and hang out with us.
I think that that one of the earlier questions talked about how can we improve the experience for the candidate, and I didn't quite So I was just thinking about, so a lot of when you deploy these chatbots and these automated systems from a preliminary interview perspective, or the pre-screening perspective, one of the things that I think it's important to note that it can be kind of frustrating for the candidate on the candidate side, right? Because what ends up happening is that they go through the process and they're answering the questions, or they're doing whatever they're asked to do there because they're trying to get a job, right? But what's interesting is that what can get lost is the sort of reasoning for some of the questions, and understanding the context. And so from a candidate's perspective, I think improving that will be through communication, effective communication, and the ability for that candidate to sort of maybe have opportunities to establish context and understand why they're maybe going through a certain process. Some organizations, they just don't want to disclose that, of course. But it's going to be, I think, important to improve that communication and understanding, because you can get candidates that might be a perfect fit, but they might get frustrated with that process, and they may not show very well in the pre-screening. And organizations could be missing these candidates simply because that two-way conversation isn't established early, right? It's more of a one-way broadcast. And so that's something to be aware of, and learn as to how candidates can maybe interact with these automated systems.
What about the biases? You did mention about the biases that is for the pro side, but isn't that also a risk on the con side? Because now, as I said, like higher view basically kind of assesses, takes the first round, and it is looking for cues. It is looking for expressions of, dishonesty and everything. Like they have fed it all the micro expressions and everything. So it is half of the time it is like tapping into the psyche of the candidate, that what his posturing is he, when he's saying something that he has done, is it true? But what about it if it gets wrong, right? So the candidate has been excluded in the very first round. So what are
right? Well, it's about ranking the importance of these types of things, right? So everybody in our lives, we've all made mistakes. We've all done things maybe that at some point we regret. Maybe when we were much younger, we're going to be doing foolish things or whatnot. So I think we need to be careful, in terms of what level of priority is assigned to these types of things, as to whether that, because again, the solution is not going to think about this. It's just simply going to match data with decision-making processes and say, oh, well, you're excluded because you jaywalked in 1982. And so we've got to be careful with those in terms of how things are prioritized. So as an HR professional, if I'm looking to deploy a new application, I want to ask the solution provider about biases, about those kinds of things, about errors and omissions, about those, how do they address them? What did they do to test that and pressure test it to understand that it's being, still accurate, or it can be molded in a way that fits my organization going forward in terms of what I prioritize, and then again, that is a bias from the organization perspective, but it's still, we can't avoid it in a lot of ways.
There is also accountability concerns, right? Because who owns it? If something goes wrong, who owns it, right? That this was a theory that Elon Musk also talked about. Like if a Tesla car hits a pedestrian while the AI is driving the car, who is accountable for it? Is it the owner, or is it the Tesla, or is it the AI? Like who gets punished for it, right? So,
well, as a fully recovered lawyer, I can answer that question, and the answer is it depends, and it depends on what you mean by punished. If just being sued is a punishment, even if you win the lawsuit, you're going to lose the lawsuit, because just being sued is expensive and awful. Fortunately, that's never happened to me or to our company, but it happens to a lot. Technology vendors, including those whose products have AI at their core, are really, really good at writing their contracts to disclaim any kind of liability. There's going to be an indemnity clause in there that only goes one way. There's going to be all sorts of warranties. They're going to tell you that the software is not fit for the purpose. In other words, only a fool would buy our software. Please buy our software. Some of the clauses that you read in these contracts are just bizarre. At the end of the day, and I recently interviewed the commissioner of the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC. At the end of the day, at least in the US, and I suspect the same is true in most industrialized countries, the employer is liable. Now, the vendor may also be liable, but if you as an employer choose to use that technology tool, that's your choice, and you are going to be responsible for whether that product is well built or not, whether it is illegally discriminating against people of color, women, etc. That's on you. And you might be able to sue the vendor and have them cover your loss, but there's still going to be harm. There's still going to be harm on you.
You know, what's interesting about that statement, Stephen, is that AI, we've all heard of being a black box. We don't understand how it makes the decisions it's making. We don't understand the process and how it learned to do something that it wasn't originally maybe tasked with or designed to do. And so it's evolving at a level that is really fascinating, so fast that, for example, Google itself admits that it doesn't know why its own LLMs are learning certain things that it wasn't tasked with learning, for example, and communicating in an entirely different language altogether, for example. So imagine if you're the organization that then deployed that model and you don't yourself fully understand how it operates and how it's learning and why it's learning in a way it is. That's what's really at the core of this. And so I'm really, gratified that, for example, the White House put out report this morning that major companies like OpenAI, like Microsoft, Google, Meta have agreed to follow a set of rules. And I think that's absolutely critical for the world and all those who control these language models because of this factor right here, right? And so it's important to really invest yourself some time and effort. And this comes to the expense of deploying these solutions, right? You have to invest some time and effort and resources in understanding it before you deploy it. And it's not enough to just look at the glossy brochure on the website and watch the instructional video for 2 minutes and say, oh, this is our answer. We've got it. Let's do it. And I mean, I've been in software sales, and a former nut for 20 years. And I know that, that's not the result that I would want, but I should be prepared to defend my platform on all levels and be able to explain it with increased transparency. And so that's going to be a struggle for the AI industry in terms of revealing what their black box does and how it does it. But that's coming.
So Simrat, that slide that you showed 10, 15 minutes ago with the different technology tools. So I spoke with one of the leaders at one of those 6 organizations, and I'll leave that unnamed in fairness to them. What he told me was that the black box and the not being able to figure out why the AI has made these decisions is one of the biggest excuses in the industry, that there's nothing about AI, the way it makes decisions, that prevents that kind of audit trail. The programmers have chosen not to retain that data. And what his opinion was, it was out of naivete, that they didn't think that anybody would actually question the results of the AI. So their system has an audit trail. So if you go in and you say, why did you rank this candidate higher than that candidate? They can basically show you it was this characteristic or this characteristic or this characteristic. If I was an employer looking to buy an ATS that had ranking software, assessment software, anything like that, especially on the hiring side where discrimination is a real hot legal issue, I would not buy software if that vendor couldn't explain to me why it ranked one candidate and not another well, why it rejected one and endorsed another. If the software can't do that, I would stay away from them. It would be like an employer going to a staffing company and saying, I want your help in hiring a salesperson or 5 salespeople, and then presenting to you a list of the finalists ranked, and you say, why is she ranked higher than he is? And if they can't articulate that for you, you wouldn't want to be working with that staffing company. And AI software is no different. They should be able to articulate it. The software is making those decisions, it's making those rankings, it's a matter of it keeping a record.
Definitely true, but I think like we can prompt, like if a prompt is there to kind of record why the decision was taken and do a brief summary of it, then with the hiring decision, it can also tell you that why it took that decision. So it can be done essentially, but as you said, like they are not doing it. Like the only thing is like when customer asks for it, they might add this prompt like, okay, from now on, it will do it.
Vote. Yeah, it's like I think Obama said before one of the last couple of elections, don't just get mad, vote. And for buyers of HR technology, don't just get mad, use your dollars. If you don't send your dollars to some of the less ethical companies, some of the companies that aren't going to provide you with the data that you will need to defend yourself, send your dollars someplace else. Look for a partner that does provide that level of data, that accountability. But if they're going to put it all back on you and tell you that our software isn't fit for the purpose and no, we're not going to explain to you how it works, just trust us. To me, that's a really good reason not to trust them.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, it starts with, for example, an organization establishing an ethical framework by which they're going to go through this digital transformation project, right? And I'm using a little bit of jargon there, but the reality is though, is that you start by looking at, okay, what do we value, right? What are our ethics, and where do we align? And if the organizations that you want to do business with don't align with those ethics, with that ethical framework, and especially in the case of AI, it's really important to understand where the ethics lie within the organization you're going to do business with, because of this one example, for example, which could potentially be very serious. And so you want to understand that. And I think that's just good business in general, but quite frankly, a lot of times that's left up to, in the smaller organizations especially, it's left up to the intuition of the founder, the owner, the CEO. And that's how it's determined. Hey, I really like, these are our people. I really like what they're doing. I like their culture. I like where they're headed. That's sort of the stuff that kind of gets said. But I think you have to dig a little deeper than that. And I think you have to understand where their ethical framework is in terms of how they've developed their platform and their algorithms and what they're willing to do and unwilling to do. And if they've overlooked something that you've pointed out, well, and if they're willing to look at that and say, well, look, that's really reasonable. That's something we should do and look into. Thank you very much for pointing that out. We'll get right on it. Well, that's the right response possibly, right? So I think it's an important discussion to have for sure.
Yeah, and maybe as a thank you, they'll send you a gift card to the finest dining in Winnipeg, VJ's Drive-In. I promised you guys I'd work that in. I worked it in.
Yeah, it's I've heard about this place. There's quite a bit of folklore behind it, and the next time I'm in Winnipeg, I'll have to definitely put it on my list of things to do.
The French fries with too much vinegar, that's going to be on Simrat's tab.
Is there such a thing as too much vinegar on French fries? I don't think there is.
When you bite one and you cough, perfect.
Yeah, you've reached the threshold, right?
We will continue this discussion separately now. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Simrat. Thank you, Walter.
We'll release a white paper with all the key takeaways as well as tech stack. You guys would be receiving that in your email in a couple of days. Thank you so much for joining us. And that's it. You said, oh, mama, right? So peace out.
Cheers.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody on the call for tuning in and staying with us. And appreciate any feedback. You can reach me on LinkedIn and or you can visit walterschwabe.ca and have a look at it and reach out to me there. Thank you so much for your time and your attention.
Thank you, guys. Have a nice day.